Welcome to the Checking the Gate podcast. This is your host, Douglas Ferguson, and today I have with me... Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Keith McNally, and yeah, this is exciting, man. This is
Welcome to the show.
Long time coming. I feel like we've talked about movies many times over many years, and we never recorded it before.
It's true. I think I even mentioned you being on the show like ages and ages ago, and I'd only gotten around to it months and months later, but here we are. So dreams really do come true.
And back when we first knew each other, like, podcasts were just brand new. They were just a brand new thing.
Here's an interesting thing, folks. I think it was you, Keith, who actually introduced me to the world of podcasts.
Maybe.
Because we worked back in the projection booth together back in the day at the Scotiabank Theatre, or was it just Paramount at the time?
Yeah, it was just Paramount.
A much better name.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got introduced to podcasts because that was one of the great parts about being in the booth. You could just listen to stuff all day long. And like you were walking around laughing, and I'm like, well, what you listen to? And you're like, Smodcast. Because it was Kevin Smith's podcast, and I'd heard of it, but I hadn't actually listened to it. And so you actually nudged me to listen to it, and I think that was my start on podcasting.
Yeah, because that was the one thing about the job was it was kind of isolated. You were just up in the booth all by yourself most of the day. So yeah, I was like dying back in 2005, like dying for podcasts to listen to, and there were so few. And like, Kevin Smith was one of the first ones. I would get stuff from the teaching company, like you could download those like lecture series.
Oh yeah.
And I would just listen to those, and they're so boring, but I'm like, whatever. It's
like it's just something you're listening to while you're doing your job, right? So
I feel like I got like a university education while I was up in the booth, and I forgot it all. But from what I hear, people tell me they forget their educations as well, so it's basically the same.
Yeah, essentially. I don't remember a lot of what I learned in high school. I only remember film school and writing because I kept doing it. So. And you also worked in a comic shop for a long time, so which overlaps with the movie audience.
Yeah, and that ties in a bit to Ginger Snaps. Should we talk about Ginger Snaps?
Out by 16 or dead in the scene, but together forever. United against life as we know it.
Let's get out of here.
What was it?
Big dog, maybe? Whoa.
Whoa, that's it? Whoa.
Think you see werewolves a lot?
Did I change last night? Howl at the moon?
How do you feel?
Wicked. You know, we're almost not even related anymore.
Yes.
Or do you like to do more preamble?
No, actually, that's plenty of preamble. There might be a few outtakes. So.
Yeah, so with Ginger Snaps, technically I think my favorite movie, if I had to pick one, is Shawshank Redemption. Like, I saw it in like 95, and it was amazing, and I cried, and I was like, oh, it's so beautiful. But everybody knows it's amazing. It's like the top movie on IMDb always. It's like, it's a classic.
It's one of those ones where people are like, well, name a great movie, and you're like, Shawshank Redemption, and everyone's like, yeah, it's
one of those movies too. Like, I don't really watch it that often because I don't want it like to wear off on me or whatever.
And also it feels like it leaves enough impact that, and also it's heavy. Like,
right.
There's certain heavy movies that you just can't watch a lot. Like, you watch, you're like, okay, I'll see it in a few years.
Yeah, it's not like necessarily fun to watch.
Yeah.
So that's what I was thinking, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I was like, all right, so that's my, someone asked me at gunpoint my favorite movie, all right, Shawshank. But what's, like, my actual favorite movie? Like, what's the movie that I watch every year, and what's the movie that's always on the tip of my tongue? Like, when you first mentioned this podcast, the first thing I said was, like, have you ever seen Ginger Snaps? And, like, it occurred to me a couple of years ago, I'm like, is this dumb Canadian werewolf movie my actual favorite movie? Like, in a weird way, it's like Shawshank is the Oscars movie, and Ginger Snaps is the MTV Movie Awards favorite movie in my life, Like,
yeah.
Like, it's kind of dumb and it's kind of stupid and it's sort of low budget, and that takes so much pressure off of it that I just watch it all the time. Like, I probably watch it once a year, and it came out in 2000. I've seen it so many times, and I still love it. I watched it the other day, I still love it. So I was like, wow, maybe Ginger Snaps is my favorite movie. And the reason I found out about Ginger Snaps was, so I worked in this comic shop in New Brunswick for ages, for like 7 years. I got the job when I was in high school, and I kept it until I finally moved here when I first moved out west. One evening, I was just like the weekend guy. I just worked like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, evenings or whatever.
Yeah.
And somebody came in and was like, hey, this movie Ginger Snaps is coming out, and we'll give you a bunch of free tickets if you let us put up posters and advertise it in your comic shop. And I had no authority to approve that or anything, but I was like, yeah, that sounds cool, sure, let's just do it. And then the manager guy is just like, hey, by the way, we're now advertising a movie, like, just let it happen, okay? And to his credit, he was like, yeah, fine, whatever, I don't care, it's fine. Seems a comic shoppy, I guess. So I got all these passes to go see Ginger Snaps, which I'd never heard of, and it came out around the same time as, like, there was the Jeepers Creepers movies, and it just sounded like one of those, like, just a stupid movie. And I'm like, well, whatever, it's free, whatever, let's just go see this movie. And I feel so lucky that I got to see Ginger Snaps in a theater, because it was only released theatrically, I'm pretty sure, in Canada. I think it went straight to DVD everywhere else. Certainly in the States. It might have been in theaters in England and Australia. I'm not certain.
It definitely didn't leave any significant impact on, like, the international box office. It was like, if it went to other countries, it was probably pretty limited. And also, as is the trend with Canadian movies, it was probably limited release here as well.
Right.
Just because...
Yeah, I'm amazed it even played in Fredericton, New Brunswick at all. That seems weird. But, and I mean, the movie, for Canadian standards, did really well. They made sequels and stuff, like it, especially overseas. It was like a Donnie Darko situation. Like, nobody cared in North America, but in England, for some reason, it was a big hit.
That's actually how I heard of the movie. Because I used to be in, like, improv and acting circles quite a bit for people in Canada. One of the improvisers that people kind of knew really well, who I went to improv camp with and met, she was in Ginger Snaps too, and everyone's like, yeah, she's actually, her career's really taken out. She's in Ginger Snaps too. I'm like, I didn't even know there's a Ginger Snaps 1, but good for her. But her acting career really did take off, because I don't know, have you ever seen the show Orphan Black?
Yeah, right. I haven't watched Orphan Black yet, but it's on my list because my friend Brad loves it, and I was looking up Ginger Snaps stuff because I only watched Ginger Snaps 2 once, and I was like, whatever, this sucks.
Okay.
But yeah, I realized looking up the other day that the girl from Orphan Black is the girl from Ginger Snaps 2, and like, that's
so
crazy.
yeah, Titania Maslany, who she probably doesn't remember me, but I actually knew her and her brother for a brief time in 2003, 2004.
Wow, yeah, she's definitely doing well.
She's like she's got Emmy nominations and stuff like that. Yeah, like who would have thought? It's pretty cool. And then it makes you go like, why hasn't my acting career taken off? And I was like, oh yeah, because she's probably trying much harder.
You know, though, this is actually, I'll just bring this up now. Me and you both have personal connections to Ginger Snaps. So mine is that, and I'll get back to my little story from before in a sec. The dude Sam, the drug dealer in the movie, he came into my old coffee shop job once, and I recognized him from Ginger Snaps, and he was over the moon that I knew who he was. And Ginger Snaps. Wow. He was like, oh, that's the best, holy crap. And he was so excited that I liked the movie and stuff. So that's my Ginger Snaps connection.
There we go.
You were actually in a movie with Bridget, the younger sister, in Ginger Snaps, because she had a prominent role in the Amanda Bynes classic She's the Man, of which you were an extra. Yep.
I didn't. Who does she play? I haven't seen that movie in ages.
In She's the Man, she was just like this weird, gawky, just weird, nerdy girl that was just, I don't know, making awkward passes at people and stuff. So,
okay, wow.
How weird is that, right?
I could have bumped into her and not even known it. I mean, chances are no, but
I mean, that's a pretty direct connection, you know? You're literally in a movie with one of the cast of Ginger Snaps.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
I was just thinking that the other day when I was watching it, and I was like, oh, crap, Doug was in a movie with her. So, like, technically.
Yeah, without my knowledge.
So, I had all these free tickets to go see Ginger Snaps. So me and a bunch of my friends went, and it's just, like, not expecting anything. And immediately, I mean, this might say something about me. Also, like that, you know, I took you to see Heathers the Musical. Like, I'm apparently just into violent high school movies. That's just my thing that I like.
Apparently so. Like, I love dead teenagers. What's better than a dead teenager?
But right from the start of Ginger Snaps, like, I'm going to end up spoiling this movie. So if anybody is listening to this who thinks this movie might sound cool, really all you need to do to know if you're going to be into it or not is watch the opening credits. Because the opening credits, where it's all the pictures, the girls are doing like a school report about living in their terrible town, and the way they do the report is just to take pictures of themselves committing suicide in all these horrible ways. And the music that plays over that and the creepy pictures, I was just like, I love this. Like, I'm in. This is the coolest movie I've ever seen. And then it takes a dip after that of being a low-budget, dumb movie, but then it built back up, and by the end, I was just like, I love this movie. Holy crap, like, what is this movie? Thank God for that blessed person who just came in and gave me free tickets to this movie.
Because it is also one of those movies that you could just kind of, like, go your life not knowing about.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
And especially, with the dumb name and everything. Like, it's one of those things, like, you know, Ginger Snaps. Like, oh, like, that's actually cool once you see the movie, but on the surface, it's just a really stupid name. And, like, I totally would never have watched this movie.
It's very clever, but not, like, that clever.
Or, like, there's a line in the movie that it's right on the border of, we'll get into the plot later, but, like, Ginger is really in a bad state and things are going really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger sister says something along the lines of, like, I'm not like you. And Ginger says, I know you are, but what am I? And it's like, you know, such a bad line, so bad. But also kind of cool because she's like, what am I? Like, what's happening to me? But it's like, yeah, that line probably shouldn't have been in this movie. But it's right on the line. Like, that's the kind of movie this is, that it's like...
It's dancing that fine dance, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it could have just nosedived into garbage so many times. And, you know, you could argue sometimes maybe it did a little bit. But, like, real quick, just dipped into garbage and then pulled back out. Like,
yeah.
So, yeah, that's how I saw Ginger Snaps. And then I got it when it came out on DVD, and I would just recommend it to people all the time, like, ever since. It came out in, like, 2000, and 16 years later, it's still the first movie that if someone is asking about movies or talking about movies, I'm just like, oh, have you ever seen Ginger Snaps? Like, it just never wore out for me. I just love it so much.
Well, nothing but glowing reviews so far.
And like I said, I mean, I'm just to be able to talk about it, I'm going to end up spoiling it. So if anybody thinks this sounds cool at any point, go watch it. But I don't even think it matters so much if it... I don't know. I think people get uptight about spoilers kind of more than they need to. I mean, it's a werewolf movie. You kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yes.
Someone's going to turn into a werewolf.
What? Oh, God.
So I think the first thing that's cool about this movie is, I'm not like some huge fan of werewolves or anything, but all that stuff, you know, whatever, zombies and werewolves and mummies, even, like, all this dumb stuff can be cool, or it can just be, you know, terrible. And I think what's cool about this movie is, instead of, like, you get bit, you turn into a werewolf, and then 2 or 3 days later, or one night later, whatever, you turn back, that doesn't happen. It's arguably a more plausible take on becoming a werewolf, because you get bit, and then it takes a month, and it's just like an infection, and you transform, and you don't turn back. Like, that's it.
Yeah, it's a nice kind of different take. Without, it sort of, like, kind of legitimizes it to some extent. I mean, not really, but there's this line of, like, okay, well, maybe these aren't Hollywood werewolves, because it's not like they can't be killed.
Right.
One of them gets hit by a truck, and then dies, and that's it.
And I love the little detail, like, that they kind of piece together that it wasn't just a monster because it has a circumcised human penis still. Like, this was not just some weird wolf creature. Like, something different about this.
I've seen some Metamorphosis movies like that, but usually I know I've seen, like, a zombie one, Zombie Honeymoon, I think it was called, where it was another sort of, like, slow transition into becoming a zombie. But this one was much better.
It's neat too, like, with that stuff, you know, just like the Wolfman, the werewolf, whatever, like, that long history of this stuff. That's what's easy about genre fiction, I guess, is that's the buy-in. You just accept that werewolves, fine, werewolves, I've seen 100 werewolf movies. And then from there, then you can kind of take it in, like, this more emotionally resonant, less silly way.
Yeah, true, actually. You buy into the premise, and then if they can even build a little bit more plausibility around that, then you're like, oh, okay, no, I'm sold on this.
It's very similar to, I know we've talked before about, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and you're like, I'm not into that show.
No.
But it's a very similar...
I tried, but I didn't. And
it's a really similar thing of just, like, taking monsters and using them as metaphors. Like, in Buffy, their high school is on the Hellmouth, because school is hell. And in this movie, it does kind of hit you over the head with it, but it's such a good metaphor that I think it works really well, that it's these two sisters, I guess we should say, Ginger and Bridget. They're in high school, and they're both really late having their periods. And Ginger finally has her period, and then gets bit by this werewolf. And they just think that's all it is at first, is just that she's got cramps and she's just going through the changes of being a teenager or whatever.
That's sort of how they buy the more plausibilities. The mother, like, notices she's acting weird and is more, like, sexual and animalistic. And they're like, oh, she's finally turning into a woman. Actually, and this is something I really appreciated about the film, was that I always had this theory. I don't know if there's any, like, credibility to it whatsoever, but I always had this theory that werewolves were invented just by guys talking and joking around a table about how, like, once a month their wives would turn into monsters.
Right.
Something like that, where it's just a bunch of guys, like, dicking around, and then they spin this sort of, like, thing based in reality into a kind of a fun, like, what would turn out to be a huge, like, genre. And it actually makes a kind of a nice, legitimate connection between, like, having your period and, like, going through, like, really big hormonal changes and turning into a giant monster.
Yeah, I love too, like, when they're talking to their, like, guidance counselor or health, or the nurse, I guess, at the school, and, just questions like, hair where there was no hair before, and she's like, oh yeah, that's normal. But in Ginger's case, it's like her scratch that she got scratched by the werewolf is healed over and is growing hair. Like, they're talking about some more serious
like,
shit.
We're not talking about pubes. We're talking about werewolf hair all through our bodies.
And it's cool too how it really does, like, I don't know, it's like, it's this movie that you can really tell is written by a woman in, like, this way that me or you could never do this, could never, like, pull off this whole metaphor of how it all works. Because then it goes kind of another step where Ginger just is, like, slowly, basically her and her sister are really isolated and introverted and the creepy goth kids, and they don't like anybody and nobody likes them. And then Ginger, as this wolf animalistic stuff starts, coursing through her over the course of the month, gets more and more outgoing and more interested in boys all of a sudden, and it's like normal puberty and stuff, normal hormonal whatever, but just, like, cranked up to double.
Yeah.
But it's because she's turned into a freaking werewolf. And, like, I just think that's so cool. Like, this will come up too later. I got some thoughts at the end. But yeah, like, if you just do direct stories about these topics, like, it doesn't work for me as well as, like, monster metaphor. I just love way better. It's, it's a movie, it's a story. Like, take that kernel of a real thing and, like, these two sisters growing apart, and one of them is interested in boys now and the other one isn't. But not just a normal, boring, slice-of-life, whatever movie. It's because she got bit by a werewolf, and oh my god, she's out of control.
What's great is that you could take out certain elements, and this would make an okay teen movie, like, just about teenagers, about a girl, like, discovering her sexuality, and it'd be kind of funny. But then, like, if you take out other elements, like the more teenage element, then it'd be an okay werewolf movie about a sister and her transforming other sister, and then you mix them together, and it actually does make it like a much better whole movie, because you get, now they have that deeper element. It's just like that's something that's a little bit more, takes it out of the shallow end and then puts it into something that where you can read a little bit more into it.
And I find too with stuff like when it's got that silly veneer of a werewolf movie or whatever, it does just kind of take the shackles off of, like, I can just kind of get more into it. Like, there's been plenty of times when there's some movie that, I remember there was this movie In the Bedroom that won a bunch of awards, and, man, there was this other one. What was it even called? I hated it so much. But these movies that win all these awards because they're about these similar kind of topics or about families falling apart and whatever, but they're just a straight-up drama. And it just makes me uncomfortable, and I just don't like to watch it, and I just am like, like averting my eyes the whole time and feeling weird about it. Where if it's a silly monster metaphor put on, it just kind of allows me to get into it more, and, like, I actually get more out of it. It's like, I love Kevin Smith has a line he says all the time, that fiction is the lie that tells the truth,
Yeah.
Like, if you just try to tell the truth, like, well, that's boring. Life's boring. My life's boring, your life's boring. Stop telling me about your boring life. But if you tell me a lie that is a metaphor about the truth, then it's interesting and cool and exciting.
And it's also true that there's a level of this movie that's really about, like, women discovering their sexuality. And I think it'd be really weird for a couple of guys to sit down and watch a movie about teenagers, getting in touch with their sexuality. It just seems like it'd just be kind of weird. But if you had this werewolf aspect, then it's like, no, it's about werewolves.
Yeah, like, it would even be, like, it's almost like it's a bad thing for movies to be entertaining, too. It's like, as if this was just about, I slept with this guy and everyone thinks I'm a slut, and, it's just sad. It's just depressing. Whereas if it happens but you're also turning into a werewolf, like, it's still in there, it's it's part of it. But yeah, but it is like, it's a real fine line to walk, and it's so easy to be goofy and silly. And so let's talk about where I do think this movie is sometimes pretty tough to swallow.
Okay.
Just that it's Canadian. Let's talk about Canadian cinema for a bit.
No, that's totally legitimate, actually. This film started up a lot of controversy, apparently, in that it was funded by Telefilm Canada. So if anyone who's listening who doesn't know, Canadian cinema doesn't work the same way that American cinema does, where things are funded by big studios. A lot of our films are low budget because they're funded by the government, and there's only a certain amount of money allowed to be allocated toward the art of film. When I had the misfortune of coming out around the same time as like the Columbine shootings and stuff like that.
And it's very violent.
It's
gross.
Violence, death of teenagers in high school around that time was just a very sensitive subject, and the film was not gonna like just stop being made because of it.
Kind of reminds me of The Dirties that you also reviewed on this podcast, right? How can you make these movies with these horrible things happening to high school kids, except in Canada?
Yeah, pretty much. There was a lot of controversy whether or not the government should be even allowed to fund films that are graphic and violent and sexual and, basically all the stuff that, you wouldn't show your mom. And I think that it does kind of lend a good case as to like, okay, it bothered a lot of people at the time, but now it is a strangely successful, well-remembered Canadian film. Where like, how many other Canadian films can you say that about?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a problem with like how Canadian movies are just in bed with government money all the time is, did you ever see Bon Cop, Bad Cop?
Yes.
It was like co-made with Quebec, and it's like half French, half English, and it's just like so pandering and so transparent of like we're just trying to make a Canadian movie. Ah, terrible.
Trying to make the most Canadian movie, and it was like one of the most successful ones.
Yeah.
But mostly in Quebec.
I think though, I mean, I could be wrong now. Maybe the stats have changed, but isn't the most successful Canadian movie to this day like the stupid Trailer Park Boys movie, like for like box office gross? And it's still like sad. It's like not a lot of money that it made. But
there was also that movie Passchendaele by Paul Gross about the Battle of Passchendaele and the Canadian soldiers there, and it's a bad movie. Like it's well made and it's okay directed, but the script was just like there are points where it's like, oh, you guys should not have written that. That was not a good line at all, and it made an okay amount of money, but you can't even really say that it did because it made like $5 million or something like that, which is apparently decent income for Canadian films, but it cost like $12 million to make.
Shit.
So it was like one of the most expensive Canadian films. It didn't even like make its money back, but it was considered a success because it was compared to everything else.
And I think, like, the last time I checked up, like, the Trailer Park Boys movie made, like, $6 million. Like, it was, like, just a little more than that. And, like, that's it. Those are our heavy hitters. Like,
the trailer. And, yeah, the Trailer Park Boys, I mean...
I have a great respect for the Trailer Park Boys, but that should not be our highest-grossing movie. That's ridiculous. But that's what's weird, too, with movies is, it's like you can make all the fancy art films that you want, but in the end of the day, it's either, like, Trailer Park Boys movies about weed or werewolf movies filled with blood are the only ones that anybody gives a crap about. Like, and
I love art house films. In fact, like an episode that's going to be out just before this one is Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal, which is a Canadian film as well. But you don't watch that and go like, oh, a lot of people are going to want to watch this because it's just not easy to get into. Where I feel like Ginger Snaps, it is at least like you said, you've recommended it to tons of people. You can watch it, and it's not a highbrow film, but it's accessible.
Right.
It's understandable why it was sort of like the Canadian hit that it was.
I could see, too, like, why so many Canadian filmmakers and artists of all types go to the States, because it's just, like, a sad ghetto in some ways in Canada. Because, like, Ginger Snaps did pretty well, like, the sequels and everything, like, for a Canadian movie, they knocked it out of the park. But the people that made it, like, the sequels are not that great, and they're written and directed by other people.
Yeah.
And the guy who directed Ginger Snaps, he did produce the sequels, but he, like, works on some Canadian TV shows and stuff. Like, he's had a career, but it's just like whatever, just these weird little shows. The woman who wrote it, again, like a couple little TV deals. It's like, even if you succeed, like, you did it, you made a Canadian movie somebody gave a shit about, and you still kind of don't really get to have like a career. Like, it doesn't build to anything. What is the point of making things in Canada? Like, what is this,
Luckily, it is getting better. Oh yeah, he's partially responsible for Orphan Black. So
well, there you go.
He co-created that one. He's doing well, but it's 15 years later or so,
right.
So that still takes a long time to get anything done.
And, like, I would be interested to know, like he was at least involved in these sequels in some way, but, like, obviously the lady who wrote Ginger Snaps was the key to Ginger Snaps. How come she didn't write any of these sequels? Like, we finally have a Canadian hit. Let's ruin it. Yeah, look at her little wiki page. It's so sad. It's like 2 paragraphs.
She wrote for some show I haven't heard, and a few episodes of Queer as Folk.
Oh, she's doing some stuff on Orphan Black. Thank God for Orphan Black.
Yeah, apparently so.
The vindication for all these people.
one of our star vehicles right now. That must have international appeal because it got like Emmys and stuff. So
yeah, but that's part of the Canada thing is that it doesn't have a big budget. I think this movie was like $4 million or something, which for Canada, pretty robust budget. But in America, that's the amazing number. People are like, whoa, they made that whole movie for $4 million. Like that's the miracle number.
That's the thing, is that at least this movie was probably considered a success because it didn't cost that much money to make. What would cost any money to make? Probably just the werewolf effects at the end.
Right. So I think that is kind of the biggest knock against this movie, or when it does fall into kind of bad territory. I really think it's more the budget than it is like anything in the planning or conception of it, because I noticed when I rewatched it the other day, that opening is like so amazing and the music's so good and the photographs of the girls killing themselves is amazing. And then the next 10 minutes, I was like, this movie is a little worse than I remembered it being. Like, it's just these weird Canadian accents, and every sign is in French and English, and it just has that feeling of no money. you know?
Like, let's buy some time until we can actually get the action started.
Then you recalibrate to that. You're like, all right, this is the kind of movie this is the level that we're at, and you just get comfortable, and then it just starts working.
Yeah, it's true. Is that your brain kind of just goes, okay, no, this is the film quality. This is how it looks. Now we can engage in the story. I've noticed that with a lot of films, where it's just sometimes you just have to recognize what it is. Like 28 Days Later, how it's really grainy film stock. Actually, I think it was because it was on early digital cameras.
Right.
And so at first you're like, wow, this is really not good quality. But then once your brain adjusts and it gets involved in the story, you don't even notice it anymore.
Maybe it's even almost a problem in Ginger Snaps that opening title sequence is so awesome.
Yeah, it's like she blows his load a little too early.
Because I remember definitely the part I was having the most trouble is they're playing field hockey near the start. And it's just kind of like a bunch of half-assed actors all at once. Like Bridget, the younger sister, is by far the better actor. Ginger is an okay actress, but she's...
But she was hired more because she could pull off that I'm goth and spooky, and then also amp it up to be sexy later on when she needs to be.
So they had her, and she was arguing with Trina from the field hockey team, who is also kind of a half-assed actor. All these people have had long TV careers in Canada, but that doesn't mean they're good actors. They're not bad, but they're not great.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, there's the douchebag kids that are the boys sitting on the bleachers that are just yelling sexual comments to all the girls and stuff. And they get in this fight, and the whole thing is awkward. And I'm like, I don't like any of this. This is all bad. And then what really killed me is there's this monster that apparently is somewhere in the town that's killing everyone's dogs. They don't know what it is. Of course, it's a werewolf, but people's dogs keep being found dead. And during this tussle that the girls were having during field hockey, the younger sister, Bridget, gets pushed down into the corpse of this not a small dog, a big dog that's had its guts torn out, and it's all gross, and there's blood and guts everywhere, and it's right in the field, and somehow nobody noticed it. And I'm like, that's just bad filmmaking. And then even the reaction is just ew, gross. Everyone would be freaking out right now.
I would look at that and be like, I don't even know what animal this is. I need to call somebody. Please.
So to me, that whole scene, that's kind of the low water mark. But it happens early on, and I was like, oh man, I hope I wasn't wrong about this movie all these years. Maybe this movie sucks. But I'm glad, after that, though, that was kind of it's not going to get worse than this. And then it just keeps gradually getting better and better and better. And it was okay. So again, if anybody's checking out this movie and they're like, geez, what's he talking about? This movie sucks. Yeah, some of it sort of sucks. but yeah, just
ride it through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It'll all work out.
I gotta say, one of the things I did like about this film was I liked that it was a nice slow burn to get to the actual werewolf. You don't see much of the werewolf that initially bites Ginger.
Right.
But you do see a lot of, later on when Ginger becomes a werewolf, you see a lot of that. And I'm so glad that they went with practical effects instead of, early 2000s CGI or something like that. I think that would have made rewatchability of this film nowadays impossible. Once you see that big CG werewolf, you're like, no, I can't be a part of this.
It's awesome too, right? Apparently, that was a distinct choice. They were there's no CG in the whole movie, which maybe they could have used a little, because I noticed when, spoiler alert, Trina gets killed at one point by accident. They kill her and they hide her in the freezer, and I just noticed her eye move.
Oh.
And it's you're supposed to be dead. But yeah, like with the werewolf effects, yeah, it's cool. Like they built a big werewolf suit and like animatronic head and everything, and it's very similar to like what we were just saying in general of like you just got to get used to it. Like I remember in the theater that first moment you see the werewolf, you're like, oh dude, that's just a fucking guy in a werewolf suit. But it only feels weird for like half a minute. And then it actually feels cool because it's like The Thing and like all these awesome old 80s movies where this is what they did. It always was a little bad in those days, but no one minded. And like I just got back into that mindset real fast. Like this is cool, this is fine, and I actually respect that they've done it this way.
And again, so with a budget of under like $5 million, the CG was not going to be good.
Yeah.
Like, especially at that time. In the early 2000s, forget about it. It would just look so atrocious.
One thing I always think of with that, where like I wish more people would do practical effects, is Devil's Rejects, which is a really cool movie, Rob Zombie's movie. And it's mostly practical, but there's this one part where there's like a fight in a hotel, and they throw a knife at this woman, and the knife hits her in the chest and she dies, and it's a CG knife. And now that I've told you that, you'll never not be able to see it. It looks like shit.
Well, I probably wasn't going to watch it, but fair enough. One of the worst cases of really badly aged CGI is the Spawn movie.
Oh, man.
The hell sequence at the end. Did you watch it?
I never saw the whole Spawn movie.
Oh, okay. I never watched the whole thing either. I watched the end. And I was like, oh, boy. Woo.
So between the two of us, we probably saw the whole
movie. Exactly, yeah. And it just looks impossibly bad now. And I remember watching an old Siskel Ebert movie review, and one of them, I think it was Ebert, was like, oh, and that final scene was like nothing you've ever seen before. I mean, yeah. I could see at the time, like, it is a very visually realized hell, but now it just looks like shit. It just doesn't look good. It's weird that like people even bought that at any point in time. And as a result, I think that the Spawn movie, just nobody remembers as much of it anymore. Like people don't really talk about it. I only talk about it because I watched that hell sequence. I'm like, you guys, this is how bad it used to be. This is that really bad transitional stage.
It's nice too with ginger snaps because they didn't even go with like how in the original Alien, you know, they hardly show the alien. Like, they go all out with ginger snaps. They're like, yeah, we made this werewolf thing, and it's, you know, it's a 7 out of 10 werewolf suit. But here it is. Like they show it like crazy, like lots of shots of like here's the werewolf. Like they don't try to even hide it and stuff. I just think that's really commendable. It's like cool.
Have you watched the Harry Potter movies?
I have.
Yeah, Prisoner of Azkaban, I think it is. There's one where the guy turns into a werewolf.
Right.
And I think it's the worst looking werewolf. The fact that I like the Ginger Snaps werewolf more than the Harry Potter werewolf, I think speaks to like the quality of that costume. And that was a Harry Potter budget.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a weird thing with CG also, is like CG, it's bad more often than it's good. Like it's really hard to get it right. Whereas maybe I'm even being a little too hard on the Ginger Snaps werewolf suit. It's a pretty good werewolf suit. And once you've got that, like you can't get it wrong. It's a real thing right there.
Yeah.
So you just light it like everything else and you shoot it and there you go.
And you know, if you look at it, you can see, okay, no, this looks decent. Like, if you can see the flaws. Also, you can just shoot around it. If there's something wrong,
right,
you can be like, okay, well, we will try to avoid shooting the tail that doesn't like properly.
And it's not like you can see a zipper or something. Like it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's ugly, but it's, you know, it's not like it's supposed to be a beautiful creature.
It's cool too with like because the DVD had all the behind the scenes type stuff or whatever, and it's awesome to see the tech nerds making practical special effects. It's kind of like the way we were just like projection nerds. Like they're that type of person, and it's so cool that they're like showing off the head, and they're like, look at this, man, and here's the controller, and we got servos for the eyes, and we can make the nostrils flare, and like they're so into it. And it's so sad that now that's just a bunch of jerks at a computer just rendering bullshit. It's like, I miss those days.
Yeah, and I think CGI, it works. It has its time and place, but I don't think it should replace practical effects entirely.
I remember one of the most sort of demoralizing stories I heard about that, because I'm like, why don't they just always do practical? Especially if you have a $100 million budget, surely you can do this. One of the examples I heard was the Will Smith Omega Man movie. What was that even called?
Oh, yes, I Am Legend.
I Am Legend, right.
Yeah.
They originally were going to make all the monsters practical, and I guess they tested it, and they had everybody dressed up like the weird mutants, but they wanted them to be all hyperventilating all the time and, you know, acting all crazy. And within 2 or 3 takes, all the actors were just like winded and blown up, and like the shots were looking bad because they couldn't keep up that level of energy. And it's like, oh, that's a bummer. So they went to CG, and it looks like shit.
Oh yeah, that's one of the worst parts of the movie. Yeah, I mean,
and that was so sad. It's like they tried, and it didn't work.
Another sad story about that one is The Thing, the 2011, I want to say, remake?
Right.
But no, it wasn't a remake. It was actually a prequel. Did you ever watch that one?
No, I only saw the John Carpenter one.
Which is the one to see.
Yeah, it's so good.
If you look at some of the behind the scenes featurettes on YouTube, where they actually developed some really, really awesome effects for the film that were on par or better than the John Carpenter stuff. And then I don't know who made the decision to just like ditch it and then just go with the CG effects. And the CG effects, they look okay. They're not bad, but they're not great. But those practical effects were incredible looking. Disgusting in the Thing nature, but really good. That's one of the tragedies, one of the stories that really kind of rubs me the wrong way as to like sort of modern filmmaking.
Yeah, maybe that's like a lesson. If we're ever in film production directly, we can learn from Ginger Snaps, because like they really did like hardline it. Like, we're doing this practical to the end, and like maybe that's what you got to do. You got to draw a line in the sand, or some producer or something is gonna fuck shit up. Especially though, that must have been tough with The Thing, because like the John Carpenter thing, I just saw it last year in a theater again. It's so good. Like, those might be the best special effects ever. They're so good. It's crazy. Like, I don't even know how they did that stuff. But crazy
team. Another great on the subject of werewolves, the effect of American Werewolf in London.
Oh man,
the
transformation. Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
That was much better than the Ginger Snaps transformation.
It was. Oh yeah. Give credit where credit's due. But let's not take that prize away from American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
I think that might be the best.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool that, like, I like to think in the pantheon of werewolf movies, like, I really think Ginger Snaps is, like, up there. Like, probably top 5, is maybe not as well known as these other ones. I really feel like it holds up. So, so Ginger Snaps, like, I feel like, I guess we could get more into the plot, but it's weird. There's a lot of stuff going on in it, but really it's just one sister gets bit, slowly turns into a werewolf. Other sister tries to deal with it. Oh, I guess that's the thing, is so there's this local drug dealer guy who I met once at a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Who, he's all into botany and stuff, and they find out that if they make this injectable solution out of monkshood, this perennial plant or whatever, that it might purify the blood, and they have reason to believe like this could help with the werewolfification.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about that, because I always thought that seemed like I don't know about this. Is this really even be remotely strong enough? But in later years, I've like looked into just holistic medicine type stuff, and some of that stuff really is like remarkably powerful. Like it can kill you. It can do weird stuff. But I did always I don't know, how'd you feel with that? Because I always did feel like I never bought that plot device. It always just seemed like a vain hope, but I never believed it would work.
Remember when they were like, we don't even know how much to use, and there's so much guesswork, and when she wound up doing it to the other kid that Ginger bit,
right?
And she winds up injecting into him, and it does cure him?
Or seemingly.
Anyway. I'm like, that's pretty convenient. Yeah. That's pretty convenient that they actually pulled that off. They just guessed.
And that's a weird thing too, is like, to me, the sequel and the prequel, I don't really rate them. I saw them once each, and like the prequel was actually kind of cool, but the sequel wasn't really that good. And just like whatever, so they don't really count to me as anything. But But in the sequel, well, I guess at the end of Ginger Snaps, Ginger is like right on the verge. She's like becoming a wolf lady. She's like luckily on Halloween, so she just gets away with it.
Another very convenient.
As it's just like a Halloween costume, so people don't think it's weird that she's becoming a wolf. Bridget like does like a blood pact, because these sisters were always together, like we're always together against everyone, so she's like, to try to convince Wolf Ginger to come back home to take this antidote, they like do their blood sister thing of like, all right, look, now I'm a wolf too, so we're the pack again, we're together, now come with me. Ginger dies in Ginger Snaps. And in the sequel, Bridget is taking the monk's hood, but it doesn't cure her, it just slows the transformation.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where I'm like, well, that's just depressing, because that's no hope for anybody. And then, let's just spoil them both, fuck it, at the end of Ginger Snaps 2, Bridget turns into a werewolf too. Everyone's just fucked forever. So,
there you go.
But to me,
the only way is to kill all the werewolves.
Yeah. But to me, it's like, since part 2 was written by somebody else and is way, way crappier, like, I don't have a hard time, like, disregarding it. Like, to me, I like to think all of that is, like, doesn't count.
You're shelving it in the same realm as Lion King 1.5. Yeah. Which is like, this was clearly made for $1 and it doesn't matter.
So I like to think that, like that kid that Ginger infected, that they inject, is okay. And at the end of the movie, Bridget will inject more of the stuff and she'll be okay. and only Ginger's dead,
There you
and
go.
all the other people that died.
Yeah.
Like, even though the second movie totally contradicts that, I don't count it. Forget that.
Now, is there anything you didn't like about Ginger Snaps? Like, what is it that like has rubbed you the wrong way, and or you've only even noticed recently?
I think really just some of the actors. Like, so this kid that he's just like the cocky sort of blonde kid in school that when Ginger starts becoming more animal-y, she starts making out with him all the time and has sex with him unprotected, and he gets the werewolf virus. That kid's just a bad actor. Every line is bad. And he's been in a bunch of stuff. I worked for one day on this TV show called Whistler that they filmed in Richmond, of course.
As opposed to Whistler?
And he,
Okay.
I was on the special effects crew. It was this cool thing I only get to do for one day, but we made fake snow and stuff.
Cool.
He was in it. Like, he's another guy. He's had a pretty good career in Canada, but he sucks so bad. Like, every stupid line. He has some great lines. Like, he's asking Bridget, like, what's going on? Like, why is he getting all? Why did he eat his own dog? Like, what's happening? And he goes, I'm way out on the corner of fucked up and evil. And like, I love that line. I think that's so good. But he says it bad. He says everything bad. So that's really my only thing with this movie. I feel like for the budget they had and the circumstances surrounding it, I feel like they did the best they could all around, except so many people in it are bad actors.
Yeah, that's the thing is like there's got to be good actors because they worked so hard, especially to cast the lead two, and I think they do a good job.
Yeah,
The lead two
especially
actors.
like Bridget, I love. I think she's perfect. And Ginger only doesn't seem as... And she's Catherine Isabel. She's been in tons of stuff. She's like the most famous person. She was in Freddy vs. Jason. And she only seems a little bad because Bridget's so good.
Right,
But she's
yeah.
fine. Yeah, she's okay.
And that was an observation I made as well. Only I noticed that a lot of the actors who played the teens, they were pretty decent. Like the lead two as well as the drug dealer guy. But the adult actors, I felt, were almost not taking it seriously enough.
Right.
Like, they were just kind of there for the job. Their father, their mother, the principal, they all seemed to kind of phone it in.
Yeah, I think
And-
they were more on the comedy side. They
Yeah.
were more under the impression that this was more of a dark comedy than just bloody and gross.
But the key to good comedy is to not know you're in a comedy. That's what I believe.
Yeah, it's weird. Like with the mom, it's Mimi Rogers. She used to be famous too. And,
Yeah, I was trying to figure out where I'd seen her before. I looked it up. She was totally in the Lost in Space remake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was the mom. She was married to William Hurt's character. And that's a movie that I want to watch again, but I also don't want to watch again because I really liked it as a kid.
Right.
I really liked it as a kid, and I'm just so worried that I'm going to see all the flaws now. Because I can, even if I think about it, I'm like,
That's like I rewatched Flight of the Navigator once, which I loved as a kid, and that movie is really sucky. So yeah,
Don't say that.
it's risky to go back sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that, she's a good example, the mom character, where, I mean, she does what she's meant to do in the story, where she is like just this bubbly, sort of ridiculous suburban mom. But she's very ridiculous. Like, she has a literal flower to hold her hair, a big, like, sunflower that she's just wearing in her hair. And one thing I just noticed this last time I watched it, I don't know how I missed this, since the last day of the movie is Halloween, she's wearing these big jack-o'-lantern earrings for the whole end of the movie. And I'm like, those are the silliest thing in the whole world. And I think that's what she's supposed to be, but yeah, maybe it's a little too much.
Yeah, I was not sold on it. Another thing that kind of irked me the wrong way, and this is one of those little details that I think is like not a big deal, but just for whatever reason just kind of made me go, hey, no way. Was when they did kill Trish or whatever, or the...
Oh yeah, now I forgot her name already, but the bitchy girl that was on the field hockey team.
Yeah. And then they stuff her in the freezer. The next time they open the freezer, she's totally covered in frost and stuff.
Yeah, way too fast.
She's been in there for 10 minutes. You can't tell she looks like she's been in there for a month. There's no way.
Yeah, I agree. That was way too much. And I think I saw her eye move, like, literally twice. Like, every time she's supposed to get her eyes move. It's like, come on, dude.
But with the frost, then it's a case of, like, somebody put a lot of work into, like, making her look that way. And did they not get a copy of the script? They're just like, this girl's in the freezer. Make her look like she's in a freezer.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah.
I bet it was, like, again, those visual effects nerds. It's the same thing. I bet they were like, we're going to make it awesome. And they did, but you're right, like, way too fast. I noticed that, too, when I watched it again. Like, come on, really?
So, yeah, I think most of the issues are, like, budgetary things or just like little details like that just don't sell me on it.
Yeah, that's the thing, too, is just so much of it. I mean, it's amazing any movie's ever good. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact that this movie came together as well as it did overall it's weird. Like, even though it's got all these budgetary problems and just being Canadian problems and whatever, but I feel like if anyone tried to remake it, it's not gonna turn out better. Like all the bad stuff, I'm like, you know what? It's okay because somehow, through some weird miracle, like they took what has no right to be a good movie. It's kind of one of my favorite movies.
And it's one of those movies that there's no point to remaking it because it's not like it's a really unique tale.
Yeah,
it's just a transformation movie. What makes it work is all the details around it and how they've actually managed to make it kind of metaphorical. But you could just make it different, transforming into a werewolf movie. You don't need to remake Ginger Snaps.
It's one of those things too. Like, and now that I've seen this movie, I feel like it kind of like overwrote in my brain how werewolves work. Like, if I ever write a werewolf story in the future, like, I'm gonna use this method of like it takes 1 month and you don't turn back because it's so much better. Turning into a monster is one thing. How do you turn back? It's stupid.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Kind of like how George Romero changed how everyone looked at zombies.
Right.
Before that, zombies were like demonic creatures or like being possessed or like something along those lines. But he's like, no, well, this is my take on zombies, and it overrode over a lot of time what people thought zombies were, and now basically that's what zombies are. If you change the Romero rules, you're breaking cardinal sin.
The one thing, too, that has changed a lot recently is zombies can run now. I guess, like, the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead kind of made that. And I'm not opposed to that necessarily, but I always thought what would be a better detail is zombies should try to run, but they can't. They just fall down and stuff. They would still be scary. They're all just clambering at you. But I think it's weird that zombies have that level of balance.
Yeah. World War Z was one of the weirdest ones of that, where they were just, like, powerhouses, basically. Yeah, I think for me with zombies, it makes sense if they're like freshly dead that they can still run.
Right.
If they're starting to rot, I feel like they would just start to collapse under themselves and like they just wouldn't be able to because their muscles will be starting to deteriorate. So that has nothing to do with Ginger Snaps.
Yeah,
so,
but I mean, it's all this, monsters, famous monsters.
Yeah, exactly. It's in the same realm.
So I was thinking too to just to dip in and get slightly, probably inappropriately deep about this dumb movie.
Okay, let's do it. That's the point. We're looking deeper into cinema.
I guess after I had that kind of realization a couple of years ago that like, man, Ginger Snaps might be my favorite movie. That's weird. Like, when did that happen? So I started thinking about it a little more, and it's like one of these things that seems so obvious now, but it took me 14 years for it to occur to me or whatever, of watching Ginger Snaps every year and just being overly obsessed with it. So basically the way everything wraps up is they try to get Ginger home to give her an antidote, Bridget and the drug dealer guy, but it's too late. They've got her knocked out in the back of a van and she fully transforms into a big-ass wolf, and they end up having to fight her in the house. The house is empty. The parents are at counseling or whatever. Or no, I guess the mom, that's one thing I liked. The mom realizes that her daughters have killed this girl Trina, and the mom is willing to go on the lam with the daughters. I actually thought that was kind of a nice touch. Like, the mom was willing to try to help them. That was kind of cool, but they still ditch her. They're still like, yeah, Mom.
I noticed that as well. Like her last scene, she's like, where did my daughters go? And then you don't see her ever again.
Yeah, because the plan still is, because they have accidentally killed this girl because of Ginger. It was an accident, but it's because Ginger's turning into a monster and being all crazy. Oh, and then Ginger does kill a couple of people. She kills the guidance counselor and the janitor at the school. So she's really losing it. So they're still going to go on the lam, but not with Mom. They're going to try to heal Ginger and then run away. Ginger has turned into the full beast. Poor old Sam, the drug dealer, gets killed during the fight. And that's such a great scene too, where Ginger's a full-on wolf and doesn't seem like she has any human memories or anything anymore. But her and Bridget were so close. Like, the sisters were so close that Bridget is like trying to connect and like, remember, I'm your sister or whatever. And they both start drinking the blood of poor dead Sam, or almost dead Sam.
Yeah, he's like, what the? Oh,
yeah, can you imagine? Like, those are your last moments on Earth of a fresh werewolf and some creepy goth girl who is the werewolf's sister, both drinking your blood rather than trying to help you in any way. I can't think of a much worse final moment.
Yeah, well, this sucks.
In the world. But then, Bridget realizes she can't do it. She can't go along with this werewolf shit. This is like getting too insane. So in a rage, Ginger kills Sam, and in the end, Bridget has to fight Ginger, and it's a little bit of this, like, this is actually, I guess, another part of the movie I felt could have been a little stronger, is Bridget has the antidote syringe in one hand and a knife in the other hand, and it's like super metaphor, will I save her, will I kill her? And Ginger dives at Bridget and kind of falls on the knife, and like Ginger as a wolf is huge, is this giant werewolf. One perfect stab accidentally right in the heart or whatever is enough to kill Ginger. And I was like, I don't know about that. That's a little convenient as well.
Yeah.
but whatever. It's more of a metaphor than anything. So it's like, okay, whatever. The final scene I love so much. I'm actually like writing a script right now where I'm going to steal the whole end part of Ginger Snaps, like exactly, because they're both in their basement bedroom where they were all creepy and goth together and have all their pictures of themselves doing stuff. And Ginger the wolf has been stabbed and is just like breathing slowly and about to die. And Bridget's looking around the room at all the memories they had together. And then the wolf just stops breathing and then fade to black. And I'm like, that's so good. That is so good. Like, I love that ending so much. It's just so amazing. So I was thinking about this movie and why I like it so much. And this goes back to like what I was saying about how I like when things are less direct or like they come at me from a fiction standpoint or from a silly werewolf standpoint instead of a direct standpoint. So I was thinking about my brother, because this movie is obviously about
sisters,
about siblings, right? Like, you have how many brothers? 3?
I have 3 brothers, yep.
Yeah, I think I've only met 2 of them. Like, it's so weird to me when people have siblings that they get along with. Like, it seems like a weird miracle.
Really? Yeah, okay.
Because it's so not that way with me. So the short version is, man, a long time ago, like just before Ginger Snaps came out, I guess, in like the late 90s, my brother started going, he's 2 years younger than me, so I'm 36 and he's 34 now. So when he was in high school, like started going off the rails of just like getting into drugs and just being the worst. Like the worst. Like we would get in fights all the time. He threatened me with a knife. He got arrested once for like assaulting a police officer and trying to steal the cop's gun. He was in jail for a while. And just he would do horrible things like just flick lit cigarettes at my mom's face. Like he was terrible.
Wow.
I hated him so much.
I have a friend whose brother is kind of like that. Like there's such contrast to people because my friend, he's just such a gentle soul. Right. There's nothing mean to say about anybody. His brother just like steals from him all the time for drug money and like stuff like that. And they were that different as kids as well. Where Paul was a very low key, obedient kid. The other one was just a hellion from day one, and just
it is similar because any old pictures of me, like even when I'm little, I look like I'm President Lincoln or something. I'm always so. Whereas my brother, I remember my aunt told me this story once when he was really little. She was babysitting us, and he would like just have these temper tantrums and like smash his head on the floor, and she had to just put a pillow under his head so he wouldn't hurt himself. So I mean, I guess in some ways you could see these things coming.
There's nature versus nurture in this case. Nature has its way sometimes.
Yeah. But even though, we were different, like we did get along and we were friends as kids, but then as teenagers, like when he started becoming this huge asshole, kind of good in a way, it got me to move out of my parents' house because I couldn't deal with him. Like he was have these crazy fits all the time and he was just awful. He got into drugs too, and like heroin especially.
Ugh, and not a good one to get hooked on.
And I just thought it was drugs. Like I was like, oh man, drugs really do make people crazy. This is the worst. But as the years went on, especially once I moved out here, I met people that had gone through heroin addiction, and I'm like, you're fine though. You're not like that. And basically what I slowly found out or learned from my mom and stuff is that my brother is super schizophrenic. And he won't go see doctors and stuff. Like it could almost get him to go sometimes, but then he won't go. Just like crazy shit. Like he doesn't have a computer anymore because he went through this weird period where he had like viruses on his computer, and whenever pop-ups would happen and stuff, he thought it was the neighbors Googling stuff to attack him. Like what other people were doing in other houses was like affecting him, and he kind of got to the point of realizing that he was losing his mind, so he doesn't have a computer anymore or a phone. I think now that it's like all these years later, he's better, but he's still crazy and he's still on heroin. Like if you're careful with heroin, I guess it's like the Rolling Stones and shit. Like you can do it forever and it's actually not that dangerous. You won't die.
But it's hard to like do it responsibly.
I mean, it's really like now that I've got distance and I'm not around him, like it's just really sad. Like he's not only schizophrenic and not willing to see a doctor, but also addicted to heroin, and like this is a lot of holes to get out of.
Yeah.
I feel like if it wasn't for the fact that like my parents have an apartment building that he just lives in for free and they put up with all this crazy shit all the time. If it wasn't for that, like he'd be one of these guys on the downtown east side, like just, you know, weird, crazy, homeless, schizophrenic, crazy person. He might be dead, like who knows. It all of a sudden hit me. I don't know how it took 14 years, but I'm like, Ginger Snaps is about someone's sibling turning into a monster. Like, that's my fucking life. Like, how did I not realize? No wonder I like this movie so much.
You're really connected with it all of a sudden, yeah.
And it really is one of those cases of, like, I've seen so many movies about schizophrenic people or crazy people or drug addiction or documentaries or read books or whatever. And it's useful to learn stuff, like educational, but it's just like a drag. And it's like, oh, I hate watching these movies, like even if it's more directly about the situation that happened with my brother, I never like those movies. Like, I don't want to watch them. It's just a bad feeling thing, you know? It's not like no catharsis. It doesn't feel like those people know what it's like or like have felt what this situation is like. Whereas this dumb werewolf movie from Canada, I'm like, that's what it feels like. This movie is what it feels like for your sibling to turn into a monster, and you can't do anything about it.
Because Bridget, she tries her damnedest. She really tries to pull her sister through, and
it's so, like, pathetic at the end when, like, she still has the antidote, and it's like, your sister is a wolf. She's not coming back, but she's still got this weird, sad hope that, like, things are gonna go back to normal, and it's like, no, they aren't.
Yeah, no, it's too late. Yeah, I mean, I definitely got the angle of, and this is one of the things I liked about the film, is that it is, on the deeper level, it is very much about, like, these two kindred spirits having to take different routes in life and having to be different people. And, like, Bridget having to, like, find her own voice and her own personality. And I don't understand it on that personal level the same way that you do. Like, that's...
Right. I mean, I didn't either for a long time, but I think that's part of why it's so great. Like, even if I didn't sit down and watch the whole movie, a lot of times I would just watch the opening and then the last 10 minutes and just be like, I love this so much.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to explain why watching movies about the homeless problem in the downtown east side or drug addiction or schizophrenia doesn't give me that sense of visibility of, like, somebody actually knows what my dumb life feels like. But this werewolf movie does, you know? Like, it's just almost like a relief of just like, yeah, that's it. That's what it's like.
And I connect with that to some degree as well. I even recently had a very upsetting issue with a friend who also has schizophrenia and psychosis, and it did kind of wind up, like, ruining that friendship. And unlike your brother, he actually is seeking help and he is getting the care he needs, but even then it's sort of like there was still a point of, I'm sorry, you kind of crossed that line that last episode, and I just don't know if we can be what we were anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So, I do get it. Not a brother. Well, as far as we know, my brothers are all...
They all seem pretty cool.
They all seem well put together, but you know, he was a friend who was very close. And, you know, I've seen him a little bit since. Even then, it's a little bit more of a distance. So, like, yeah... I'm not ready yet.
It's weird, too, to, like, expand it out even more, is, as I get older and older, I really feel like just that basic sort of life path, like, okay, you go to school, you get a job, you get married, you have a kid, you buy a house, everything is great. I think everybody kind of realizes in one way or another that that's not true for anybody. It never works out that way. It's just not, it's like a weird fairy tale that everybody tells each other in North America. If it ever does work for people, it's because they're putting on some serious blinders to make this this silly dream work.
Yeah.
And then there's different levels to that. Like, you know, it might be like, oh, your career doesn't work out, or maybe your relationship doesn't work out. Or in the case of, like, somebody like my brother, like, everything just doesn't work out. Like, the whole thing just collapses.
You've been dealt out a deck that's made to fail, basically.
Maybe this is, like, sounds depressing on the surface, but I really feel like, I mean, I used to not even be able to talk about my brother. Like, it made me so upset. I just would, like, throat would get all tight and whatever, and it's just like, it's, like, so horrible. It's the most horrible thing that could ever happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because, despite seeing other people have drug problems or other people be homeless, like, you just get that weird sense that, well, that's not my life. That's not going to happen to my family. That just happens to other people.
Right.
I'm not going to say it's a good thing, but it is like a lesson that is good to know of, like, yeah, it is your life. There's no reason why my life should have this little fairy tale. This is really getting a little super deep, and I feel this way about, like, religion in general, kind of. It's like, you just tell people these things about God and heaven and whatever, and I don't think it's better. Or like, to take it down a notch, even just like, oh, you'll have a job and it'll be great. You'll get in a relationship and you guys will be in love forever. And, like, I don't think it's nice to tell people these things that are supposed to comfort them, because then when it doesn't happen, you feel terrible. Whereas when I finally really just accepted the fact that maybe none of these things are going to happen, in a weird way it made me feel not as bad about my brother. Because it's like, he's still alive, he is better off than he used to be. Last time I saw him, we actually had a conversation. Like, he's still on drugs, but it is almost like a medication thing at this point. So sure, he doesn't get to have the house, and he doesn't get to have the career and the big family and everything, but I'm not going to have all that either. Who has that? Nobody has that.
Yeah, not anymore.
So when you burn it right down, it's like, well, hey, I'm alive, he's alive. Like, it could be worse. You know?
We're still the sperm that made it.
So fuck you, Ginger Snaps 2. How can you make Bridget die also? Come on.
Yeah, they gotta say that is pretty disappointing to hear. Like,
Yeah.
that was their plan for the sequel, to kill off Bridget.
It's ridiculous. Let me just tell you how this stupid movie happens. Bridget is on the run and trying to inject herself and just slowly getting worse and worse and turning into a werewolf. And then she gets thrown in juvie or something. They can't identify who she is, so they put her in this house for like runaway girls and like a lockdown. And she can't get her injections anymore, so she starts turning into a wolf more and more. And she meets the orphan black girl who, his name is Ghost, which is a little much.
Okay, yeah.
And basically, long story short, Ghost realizes that Bridget is going to turn into a werewolf and traps her in a cellar so that she will turn into a werewolf and be her personal werewolf so she can feed people to her. The end. Like, who is this character? This character that had nothing to do with anything is now the Lord of the Werewolves? Who wrote this movie? Yeah, pretty dumb. So Ginger Snaps 3, also dumb but way cooler, where it's a prequel. The joke was because Ginger Snaps 1 is so tied into the menstrual cycle and that's such a big part of the story.
Yeah.
The joke they would just tell each other is like, wouldn't it be funny if we did a sequel that was a period piece? Because period. And then they really did that.
See, I feel like there's jokes that just take it a little too far.
Yeah, well, luckily in the actual movie, that's never brought up. That was just their backstage dumb joke that gave them the weird idea.
Okay.
So it's like this 18th century logging community, and it's just another version of Bridget and Ginger. And the same exact thing happens. They just turn into werewolves. This is the beginning of this curse that will never end, or whatever dumb thing. But it was kind of neat just because it was like a period piece Ginger Snaps. But again, watch it one time, never watch it again. That's fine.
They did that with From Dusk Till Dawn as well.
Oh, yeah?
They made some like direct-to-DVD sequels, and one of them was a prequel period piece. And I feel like they were just missing the point entirely from Dusk Till Dawn. Well, the whole point behind that movie is that you think it's one movie, and then halfway through, it turns out to be a vampire movie.
Right.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, no, I guess I wasn't watching what I thought I was watching. Because after that, it just becomes a crazy killing vampire fest.
I can see how that could be either disappointing or awesome, depending on who you are.
Written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Robert Rodriguez, so luckily, the first one, they did it well. And then they made sequels and a prequel, and it's like, no, you guys, why?
That's one thing that I'm glad I've become like better at as I got older, is like that I can just disregard sequels to movies I don't like, or if somebody remakes a movie or whatever, or it's not as good as the comic or something, I'm like, I don't care, like the original is still a thing, so what do I care?
Yeah.
But I really didn't feel that way, like say like 10 years ago. I just
It's like, how dare they stomp on something that's this important to me?
Yeah, and I think it really was because I just couldn't delineate it in my brain. Like every time I thought of the one that I liked, I would think about the ruinous thing that happened after and just be like angry about it.
Yeah, I became pretty comfortable with the notion of like disregarding certain things and just pretending that they just didn't happen.
No.
It's like I'm a much better person because of this. I'm a lot less jaded. I'm picking my own movie reality.
And it's weird too, like again, maybe my whole big spiel about expectation breeds resentment. You shouldn't expect all this stuff. On a way smaller level, I really feel that way now about movies and TV shows and stuff too. It's like I put myself through so much torture by expecting things to be good. Like I think I might have mentioned to you once, the one that really broke this habit was Alien Resurrection, of all movies.
Oh, yes.
Because I've always been a huge Joss Whedon fan, and he wrote the script, and I got an early version of the script, and I read it, and I was so excited. And I remember it's like, oh, this movie's not coming out for 4 months. Oh man, it's going to be the best. And as everyone knows now, it's not the best.
No. There's many things. The best is not one of them. Actually, it starts off good.
Yeah,
I'll give it that. But then
it's interesting too to see it again. It's like, wow, this is Firefly. It's exactly Firefly. It's a bunch of like,
oh yeah,
people
totally, space mercenaries.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
it's like exactly
only they get killed off by aliens. That's the difference.
Well, it's just Reavers. It's all the same. But yeah, like after that, I remember I had to have like a little moment with myself. Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you getting excited about Alien Resurrection? What is the matter with you right now?
I know I got less excited about things after working in a movie theater and watching hype get so many people amped up and then disappointed month in, month out, over and over again. I'm like, and then I just don't get excited about movies the same way that I used to. Yeah. And I think I might be better off for it. I still enjoy movies. I still love going out to the cinema, but I just can't invest myself that much anymore. Every now and then. I mean, your Alien Resurrection. What was a big one for me? See, apparently I've just forgotten them all.
Yeah, it seems so important at the time, right?
Yeah.
You're like, this is gonna be the best.
Let's. I guess we should wrap this up. So, who would you recommend this movie to? I would say, would you recommend it? But obviously you do because you recommended it to tons of people. But who would you? What audience would you think would get the most out of it?
Yeah, I guess it would be easier to say who I wouldn't recommend it to. Would only people like I have this friend Lars who has a huge problem with blood in movies. Like he had to leave from hell in the theater because there was too much blood. Like he gets physically sick from seeing blood. And this movie is pretty gross. So there is a lot of torn up dogs and a lot of people getting torn apart by werewolves and like a lot of gore in this movie.
And two sisters lapping up poor Sam's blood.
Yeah, I think if you have a problem with blood like that, like a real visceral problem, definitely don't watch this movie. But beyond that, like, yeah, why not? Give it a shot. Like, the worst that could happen is you'd be like, yeah, that is a pretty good werewolf movie. Granted, that's a low bar, because werewolves are not one of the more respected of the monster movies.
It's hard to kind of peg, like, what are the all-time great werewolf movies?
Yeah, there's very few. Maybe that's another reason why this movie always is on the tip of my tongue, is because I feel like it's a pretty safe recommendation, because worst case scenario is a fun hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And then best case scenario, maybe you learn deep shit about yourself. Who knows? And it's nice too because it is just the one movie. It's like when you were saying about like Buffy, like I don't have time for this. I absolutely agree. Like I really like Buffy, but it's 7 seasons and like 40% of it sucks. Like, I would be irresponsible to recommend that. But Ginger Snaps, man, yeah, just watch it.
Sit down. It's a single sitting. Yeah, I would recommend it to people who like genre movies. Like, it's not, like we established, it's not an art house flick. It's not Oscar bait. It's a Canadian werewolf film. There's a broad audience who loves genre flicks. Like, when I was in film school, one of the things one of my teachers recommended is like, just make a genre piece. Like, just start off making a genre piece because it's gonna have an audience. And that audience, as long as you don't like screw it up royally, which Ginger Snaps did not do, you'll have a cult following, chances are. Ginger Snaps is a case in point. You have a pretty simple idea, you put in enough spice to make it more interesting than the surface level, and you got a cult hit.
And like you said too, with the practical effects, thank God for that. That goes a long way.
I mean, what I will say is that the thing that's aged the worst is some of the like fashion and like the clothes people are wearing. Because I looked at that, I'm like, holy crap, that's my high school. Like, that is, it just brought back all these, like, that's how people dressed when I was in high school. And the timeline fits. I was in high school in the early 2000s. Like, it's...
Or even, like, it doesn't have very much music. Mostly score. It doesn't have a lot of, like, songs. But, like, the Halloween dance at the end. Like, it's just some kind of, alternative indie rap rock. Come on! Somewhat slightly techno rock song. And it's like, yeah, that's very nice.
Project Wise?
The thing is, like, I love it. I love that stuff. I guess, that's an interesting thing, too, because that is just, like, everybody gets caught in their little piece of amber. Like, my mom still just loves the 60s and everything with the Beatles and stuff, where for me, it's clearly the 90s. I love the 90s, and this movie is the 90s, no question about that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the early 2000s were just basically an extension of the 90s.
Yeah.
Took a while before everyone became the douchebags of the later 2000s.
Right. I saw a guy like today with a mustache with curls on both sides, and it's like I respect it on the one hand, and the other hand I'm like, dude, what? Come on.
Okay, well,
we did it. We did a podcast about Ginger Snaps.
There you go.
Nice.
Yeah, this'll
I'm glad I got all my Ginger Snaps theories off my chest.
Yeah,
nice.
You tapped in much deeper than I did. I mean, I liked it, and I could definitely see some layers, but it's apparently a very personal journey for you.
Well, that's the other thing too. Is like one thing, you watch a movie 2-3 times, and you start to notice stuff. 14 years I had to watch this movie to realize all this stuff. Now 16 years deep, I'm telling you all about. Like, I've percolated the thoughts. Like, this is like, it's weird with this movie where it's like I was like kind of hoping, like I'm like, I hope this movie isn't just really bad. Because it's like so just a part of my life now that I'm like, I can't tell anymore. I don't know.
It's true. You stop being able to see it objectively.
Yeah, because with like Shawshank, oh, look at that. It's top of IMDb. I guess it is good.
Yeah.
Ginger Snaps is nowhere on anyone's top of anything list.
Except for your personal top 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Or top 2, depending on who you're talking to.
I wonder if there'd even be anything else in the running. I don't think so. Ginger Snaps
Maybe it's
Shawshank.
others.
Maybe Heathers, yeah. Or the heavy metal movie, the animated one. Like, there was a little period there where I was like, is that my favorite movie? But again, even that's a thing I'm getting over, is like my favorite whatever. I used to have like my favorite album, my favorite comic, my favorite movie.
Yeah.
Who has time for that? Who cares? It's like a million things.
Anyway, thanks for joining me.
Sure.
Hopefully we'll have you again on the podcast soon, and it won't take as long as it did this time.
I feel like it was worth it. It's worth the wait.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening to the Checking the Gate podcast, and we are moving on.